Alright everyone, welcome to episode 5 of the Chief Petty Officer Guide video series. Today we're going to go on to chapter 4, Technical Management Skill. And if I had to do this over again, I would probably call this one Ask the Chief Part 1. I think I had called that to begin with, and then for some reason I ended up calling this one Technical Management Skill. Probably my nuke power background was coming into play, and felt all the parts, components of this really played into this when we get into expert power base and things like that. So before we get into it though, first I want to thank everyone who has subscribed and joined this channel and the YouTube family with me as we learn together about leadership and management techniques to hopefully make you a better Chief Petty Officer, or better First Class Petty Officer, or better leader in the civilian sector as well. This isn't, the things I talk about aren't constrained to Chief Petty Officers alone. They have their unique culture and attributes, but you can learn if you're a civilian in an organization as well. So I hope you find these useful. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and follow so you get those notifications on when new videos are in here. We're going to be doing a lot of these things going on. So, get notified, share them, like them, and move on, together doing things we need to do. So for those of you who still have not gotten the Chief Petty Officer Guide that this series follows, you can get that on our website, www.usni.org/press/books. And also it's also available online for major booksellers like Barnes & Noble and Amazon as well. So pick up a copy, follow along. Today we're going to go into your next power base, right? Chapter, or on page 26 of the CPO guide, right? If you look all the way at the right, lists all your power bases. We're going to get into expert power a little bit. Before I go there, let's review what we talked about last episode. So we got really heavily into your first power base, which is positional power. So and I didn't really mention this on the last one, but for the purposes of this series, I'm talking about your legitimate positional power as a Chief Petty Officer. But just think about it. There's authorities and positional power you have as a parent, as a brother or a sister, as a peer, right? So sometimes your authorities don't need to be defined per se. You have position just as a human being who can influence other people that you care about, or that you feel need your influence as well. So, but we talked about it in the context of being a Chief Petty Officer in a specific billet that you have responsibilities and authorities to fill. We talked about targets and how to set those. We talked about responsibility, authority, and accountability and how those play together. And then one thing I'll highlight again is, when you get new positions of power, all your power bases will change, right? So you'll possibly have more reward power. You'll possibly have access to more coercive power. You definitely have access to information power as a Chief Petty Officer and connection power through the Chief's Mess. And some billets you take, though, even though they have a broader scope of authority or responsibility, some of your power bases may diminish, okay? And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but just realize, like we talked about, review the position description for the job you're in. It should cover all those authorities and the power bases that you've got available to you. And if you're ever in question, sit down with a peer or someone who can help you along and figure those things out. All right, let's get into expert power. So chapter 4, technical management skills, really divided into, I would say, 4 sub areas. So the first one's going to be, we talk about expert power, but I specifically reference it to the CPO mission, vision, guiding, and guiding principles of technical and institutional expertise. And I'll talk a little bit more about what your expert power base entails, but that's what that section is called. The second part of this is information power. And like I mentioned in a prior episode, information power was split out in the early 60s from the original 5 power bases. And we need to specifically talk about how you can use information power to influence as you move forward. The third section would be management skills, right? So management skill and technical management skill, it's a term that I'm familiar with as a nuke, but we'll just call it management skills for the purposes of this video series. We'll get into that, and then we'll do a 4th section. We're going to get into safety management and risk leadership, risk management leadership as well. So that was all those 4 covered in this chapter of the Chief Petty Officer's Guide, but for the purpose of the video, I want to break them down into 4 individual areas. So let's talk about your expert power. So expert power is basically the ability to influence people based on their perception or your actual knowledge, right? So you know as well as I do, people are watching you, right? And I tie this back to what I said earlier in an earlier episode, right? You can lead all day with your positional power and authority. You can give orders, you can get things done in a military organization just by being the chief, right? Being a petty officer, being an officer. You've got those authorities there as long as you're giving lawful orders. We'll talk about that a little later too. But when you get into leading your teams to higher levels of esprit de corps or with a sense of commitment, now you get into needing to earn their trust and having their trust in you. And that trust is earned through their perception of your credibility or your actual credibility. And that credibility is developed by having high levels of expert power and high levels of personal power. And in organizational speak, you've heard this, right? You're going to hear these things captured as competence and character. So today we're going to get into why your competence matters. I like to frame this like I use the example of, let's go into civilian aviation, for example. You want to know when you're flying at 30,000 feet that pilot is competent in their job and they're a person of character as well. In many cases, the level of your expert power is verified and certified, right? So that pilot cannot get in that you know, in the case of a lead pilot, that left seat of the aircraft with having been certified, not just by testing, but by hours of flight, you know, having been directly observed, and through some other processes that verify their competence. And we do that in the Navy as well. You know that there's some watch stations, there's some positions of authority that you can't just get into, right? You have to be vetted by a selection board. You have to demonstrate your competence. We did this for with you as a chief petty officer, right? Your competence has been vetted well before you were selected to be a chief petty officer, right? So somewhere along the line, a chief saw potential in you. They put you in positions of responsibility and authority, and they watched you, right? And as you gained, and under coaching and guidance, you matured and you gained more knowledge of the organization. You learned about things like leadership interactions, and then they evaluated you formally, right? You took tests, and you were promoted based on your scores on on your advancement exams, which certifies your level of technical competence in many cases. And those exams obviously aren't perfect, but that's what they strive to do. You qualified PQS, right? And through the PQS process, you had to go and get checkouts. You probably went through an oral board, perhaps, you did written exams for those as well. So your competence has been verified before we put you in these positions of responsibility and authority. So that's one aspect of it, is verifying your technical and institutional expertise. But your expert power goes beyond that, right? So it's what you know about the Navy too, and life, right? Having been there, right? Been on deployment, been forward, right? Those kind of things that necessarily aren't written down anywhere, or you can't, cite them in a regulation. But it's just that life experience, right? You've been through a divorce, you've been through good relationships, you've been through bad. You've handled finances either well or not, or you've learned from those things. So that goes into your expert power base as well. Okay. And like I mentioned, your information power base ties into this, right? So as you can get more information, it strengthens your power bases, and what you do with that information does it as well. This also gets into other skills as well. Your expert power is your management skills, and that's why I specifically wrote that in this chapter. So how well do you plan, organize, direct, and control? Those things can be learned, and if you're not a good manager, you're going to see that you're going to have negative impacts on the effectiveness and efficiency and the climate of that part of the organization that you're been given the responsibility to lead. And then finally, your leadership skills too, right? So like we're doing with these things, you can learn about them, you can improve them, and you can go out and practice them. But people are watching that, right? They're watching how well, and they're gauging what you know about all these areas I've talked about. Okay, so that's one area they're judging. Like, okay, is this a person that's credible? Can I trust them, right? And what they say and what they know, is that something that I can trust, I can follow? Or if they tell me something, I don't have time to question it, but I know that the chief knows what they're talking about, and I can buy into them. And then you couple that with a strong base of personal power that we'll talk in a later episode, and you really start to generate a lot of trust and credibility and buy-in with your organization. Okay. This applies up, down, and across. Okay, so it's not just how your sailors perceive you, it's how your leadership perceives you, right? So when they're determining, hey, am I going to send this person to a position of responsibility or authority, they're gauging your competence, right, and your demonstrated competence. Some of that is captured on your evals. Some of it's based on the recommendations of your supervisors and other things. But it's also within your peers, right? So within the chief's mess, we're gauging your character and competence as a chief petty officer, right? Is this a person that gives to the team? Or they're a person that's reliable? Those kind of attributes, you're being gauged on those things as well, right? And once again, the amount of trust that people have in you is directly related to your expert power, okay? So let's talk about expert power and some of the specific points on it. I already mentioned how it's tied to your responsibility and the amount of authority that we give to you. So, doctors, lawyers, all these kind of certified professionals, um, their expert power is measured and it's tested, right? And you don't get into positions of responsibility or authority, especially when you're going to kind of make decisions on your own, not supervised, without having this vetted. Okay. It's been developing over your lifetime in your career. Okay. So since you went to school all the way, actually since your parents started developing this in you, um, simple stuff like, hey, don't touch a hot stove, all the way up going through school, learning things, not just about life and about chemistry and physics and history, but about social skills, right? So all that stuff plays into this as well. And it doesn't stop once you get initiated as a chief petty officer. So if you think like, hey, I'm the chief now, ask the chief, I got all this, you're going to find yourself, sailors will lose trust in you rather quickly. They expect that you stay knowledgeable on what's going on. You can't just rest on your laurels. And they may be learning faster and learning new things, right? A lot of technology, and especially in technical rates, your technology is rapidly turning over and changing. So you could be a chief petty officer and then get assigned to shore duty somewhere and then come back to the fleet. And guess what? You've been outpaced and you don't know. You're kind of irrelevant with your knowledge base because new systems are installed, new processes, procedures. You got to keep up on that stuff. And then, as you know, as I saw too, policies are constantly changing, right? That affect the professional development, the assignment and distribution, the family work-life balance of our sailors. So you got to keep up on that stuff by being knowledgeable. And that's why I talked about information power, reading the NAV admins and reading all the sources of information that come out that tell you when things have been changed and that allow you to read the updates to the source document and keep your expert power high. Okay. New knowledge is related. So let's talk about as a chief petty officer. You're a chief, you get promoted to senior chief, master chief. As a chief, at all three of those levels, you're going to lead at what's called the direct level, right? So you're going to be leading directly through people. You're going to influence people at the unit level, tactical level to get things done. But as a senior chief or master chief, you're going to move up into new positions, possibly called executive level leadership, working in the command triad, or strategic level leadership when you're working on a flag staff. And this just isn't reserved for command master chiefs. We have rated master chiefs out there that are working at the executive and strategic levels of management. So to do well there, you need to learn things. You need to learn how organizations do things, how systems, organizational systems and processes shape behavior. You need to understand broader risk management. You need to understand things like normalized deviance, right? How does the Navy, program, plan, and budget, right? You need to have an understanding of what a CR does to the organization. So clearly, those are things that a chief petty officer that doesn't necessarily focus on day to day to get done what they need to get done. But if you're going to really be able to contribute with some credibility at the high levels of the organization and some of these other positions, your knowledge base is going to have to increase, and you're going to have to, in many cases, do a lot of self-learning. Okay. And finally, I'll talk to you. You own the strength of this power base. Okay. You can invest in it and you can build it up. And you should be doing that. It's not like you should be doing those things, but you can also let it erode and become irrelevant. So if you grow your base, your credibility only gets stronger. If you let it weaken by constantly demonstrating you don't know what you're talking about, you're going to find that, sailors may have to do what you say, but they're going to do it with an amount of cynicism, and they're definitely going to be talking behind your back that, hey, chief doesn't know, or hey, can you believe what chief just said? Remember, they've got access to information on social media now, the people you lead. So their expert power base, in many cases, can be as high as yours. So you may say things that they are raising an eyebrow at. Just make sure you're staying up on the expert power base. So here's some things you can do to keep your expert power base high. So first of all, you can always facilitate training. Get out there, facilitate training, get it and lead briefs, right? And this isn't to, cover down on things your shortfalls, but by going out there and being confident and demonstrating you know what you know, people will see that, and leadership from all levels, up, down, and across, will see you talking about it and demonstrating you know what you know. So get in those positions to lead training briefs, even Q&A, conduct Q&A sessions during evolutions. That all works to build your expert power base, okay? I talked about already, that self-learning you do, right? Don't wait to be told, but constantly be in your publications, be in your, NSTMs, all the source documents that govern your expert power. Keep your knowledge high, perhaps go to college and learn something that's related to your field. Those are other ways to keep your expert power high and build it. You can write articles, right? So that demonstrates it. So forums such as Proceedings Magazine and others, Joint Forces Quarterly, you can write as, and if you get published, those things are vetted via editorial boards, right? You don't just get to write anything and put it down. That your expert power is gauged on those. But if you get published, that's shows that you know what you're talking about, and it's a really great forum to show your expert power. And then other things you need to do is, right, you need to understand I've mentioned this before, what the right resources are, staying up to date on knowledge, make sure you know the information, make sure you know the up-to-date info, so that if you're putting out gouge or you're watching evolution, you're not citing something that was, 10, 20 years ago that was right, but these days it's not as well. Finally, when you don't know something, right, there's going to be those cases when you don't know. You just can't know everything that's out there with the amount of information that's changing, even if you're connected with a strong source of information power. When you don't know stuff, admit it, and then take that opportunity to learn together with your team, right? So if it's a new maintenance procedure, a new piece of technology, don't run away and hide from that stuff. Get out there with your team, learn together, and then you show that, hey, I'm learning as well, and learning is important. It's important as a chief petty officer is to a young petty officer. And you'll see that really strengthens not just your expert power, but that'll build up your personal power as well. And we'll talk about that. Okay. Expert power also it's going to facilitate many of your influence tactics. So I mentioned in an earlier chapter that the strength of your influence tactics is tied directly to certain power bases. So specifically, if I'm going to try to use rational persuasion, or an inspiration appeal, or even a legitimizing tactic, all those rely on you to have knowledge of what you're talking about, right? You got to be able to cite the right reference. You got to be able to know about the data you're talking about. We've all been there. I think you've seen that before. When someone starts to talk to you and influence you with a legitimate or with a with facts and figures, and they don't know what they're talking about, you instantly know they don't, and you dismiss them right away. So don't get in a position to do that. Before you go in there, make sure you know what you're talking about. And before you wield the influence tactics you want to use, make sure that you've got the knowledge that supports those tactics, okay? So go out there, work, and keep that expert power base high. Once again, at the end of the chapter, in the Chief Petty Officer's Guide, Chapter 4, there's some questions, there's some text boxes for self-reflection. In the Petty Officer Guide, we really go into depth on a lot of expert power base self-reflection and text boxes that can help you do what you need to do. So that's it for this episode. A little longer here, but next episode, like I said, we're going to dive more into information power, and we're going to talk about how you can use information power to strengthen your expert power and strengthen your influence attempts. Until then, we'll see you then.